Hello and welcome to the Matthew Rocky Show for this week of May 23rd. My name is Matthew Rocky, and it is a pleasure to have you along for the podcast again this week. We're going to get started with a look at the latest in news. A measure of U.S. home sales based on signed contracts dropped to a two-year low in April. The latest in a string of data points suggesting the housing market may be heading into choppier waters. Contracts to buy previously owned homes fell 3.9% last month to a reading of 99.3, the National Association of Realtors said in a May 26th statement. That's the sixth consecutive month that the NAR's pending home sales index has retreated, the April's readings being the lowest in 2 years. Mortgage rates have also been on a tear recently as the Federal Reserve has embarked on a course correction away from the pandemic-era easy money policies. The rate on the benchmark 30-year fixed mortgage has shot up to over 5% after touching a low of less than 3% last fall. Low housing inventory combined with rising mortgage rates have made buying a home less affordable. A Texas Department of Public Security official said the 18-year-old suspected of killing 21 at a school in Texas on Tuesday appeared to have walked unobstructed into the building before the incident unfolded. Victor Echelon, the South Texas Regional Director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, told reporters Thursday that the door at Robb Elementary School, where the shooting occurred, was left unlocked when the suspect entered. Before that, according to Echelon, the suspect crashed a pickup truck and fired shots at two people outside a funeral home. Authorities say that the suspect walked down a hallway and into a classroom where he opened fire into two connecting classrooms, killing 19 students and two teachers before he was shot by an officer. During a news conference on Wednesday, state officials say the suspect was killed by a Border Patrol agent. With the end of the academic year in sight, an overwhelming number of educators are planning to close the book on their teaching careers. Much of this stems from post-pandemic classroom behavioral challenges with students and ongoing staff shortages that have created excessive workloads for teachers. Many educators who have 25 years or more under their belt are opting to retire, but even less seasoned ones are walking away and choosing a different career. Back in February, the National Education Association released a study conducted by GBAO Strategies that revealed a startling 55% of teachers plan to leave their profession ahead of schedule. The NEA is the most prominent teachers union in the United States and represents 3 million educators. Widespread educator shortages predate the arrival of COVID-19, but the pandemic also served as the last straw for many, kicking off the trend of an early departure. A RAND study from January of 2021 showed nearly a quarter of those surveyed expressed the desire to quit after just 1 year of teaching during the pandemic. The California legislature is poised to pass Assembly Bill 2098, described as a, quote, medical misinformation bill, unquote. If passed, the new law would prohibit doctors from freely providing medical advice and treating their patients if those practices run counter to the official state-sanctioned position. In April of 2020, the State of California Department of Consumer Affairs, the California State Board of Pharmacy, and the Medical Board of California issued a statement regarding the, quote, improper prescribing of medications related to treatment of novel coronavirus, unquote, such as ivermectin, warning that, quote, inappropriately prescribing or dispensing medications constitutes unprofessional conduct in California, unquote. On June 29, 2021, the Federation of State Medical Boards issued a warning stating that, quote, physicians who generate and spread COVID-19 vaccine misinformation or disinformation are risking disciplinary action by state medical boards, including the suspension or revocation of their medical license, unquote. In August of 2021, Dr. Anthony Fauci said there was no evidence that ivermectin works and that it is more likely to cause harm. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt on Wednesday signed into law a measure that would ban abortion starting at conception, with few exceptions allowed. The measure, Oklahoma HB 4327, now becomes the strictest abortion restriction signed into law in the United States. It prohibits doctors from carrying out abortions after pregnancy. Exceptions include in the event that performing the abortion is deemed necessary to save the mother's life. Another exception is if the pregnancy is due to rape or incest that have been reported to law enforcement. Stitt, a first-term Republican, said in a statement, quote, "I promised Oklahomans that as governor I would sign every piece of pro-life legislation that came across my desk, and I am proud to keep that promise today. From the moment life begins at conception is when we have a responsibility as human beings to do everything we can to protect the baby's life and the life of the mother. That is what I believe, and that is what the majority of Oklahomans believe," unquote. The law is styled after Texas's Heartbeat Act, which means it is enforced by letting private citizens bring a civil action against any person who carries out or helps a woman obtain an abortion, and they could win at least $10,000 in statutory damages for each abortion carried out, aided, or abetted in violation of the ban. However, the measure does not allow the mother seeking an abortion to be sued. John Pierce Law has filed a lawsuit against Atlas Air on behalf of U.S. Freedom Flyers and Atlas employees and plans to sue all major airlines, 18 altogether, plus the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Transportation, contending that the vaccine mandates imposed by these agencies on the airline's employees infringed on their constitutional, religious, and medical liberties. The lawsuit against Atlas Air was filed in federal court in the Southern District of Florida with over 100 plaintiffs pursuing litigation. The lawsuit reads, quote, "Fundamentally, this case is about whether Americans should be required to choose between their livelihoods and being coerced into taking an experimental, dangerous medical treatment," unquote. Plaintiffs are mostly unvaccinated pilots, flight attendants, as well as other Atlas staff. Atlas Air is one of the industry's largest cargo carrier companies and the world's largest operator of the Boeing 747. The Republican primary for a soon-to-be vacant U.S. Senate seat representing Pennsylvania is headed to a recount, officials said on May 25th. The 902 vote difference between Dr. Mehmet Oz and businessman David McCormick is within the 0.5% margin that triggers a mandatory recount under state law, Pennsylvania Acting Secretary of State Lee Chapman said during a briefing. She said, quote, "Mr. McCormick has not waived his right to a recount, so as acting Secretary of State, I'm required by the election code to order all county boards of elections to conduct a recount of the race," unquote. McCormick had said in a statement that the, quote, "narrow difference," unquote, between himself and Oz would trigger a recount. He said, quote, "We look forward to a swift resolution so our party can unite to defeat socialist John Fetterman in the fall," unquote, referring to the Pennsylvania lieutenant governor who won the Democratic primary. Billionaire Elon Musk has again sounded an alarm over the country's dwindling birth rate, saying people should, quote, "celebrate having kids," unquote. The tech visionary has for years warned that population collapse is the biggest threat to civilization, yet he has recently focused more on domestic underpopulation. On May 24th, Musk wrote, quote, "U.S. birth rate has been below min-sustainable levels for 50 years. Contrary to what many people think, the richer someone is, the fewer kids they have. I am a rare exception," unquote. This was claimed by Musk, the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, who is also a father of 8. He said, quote, "Most people I know have 0 or 1 kid," unquote. Writing in reply Former Tennessee GOP congressional candidate Robbie Starbuck said, quote, Americans need a culture shift that celebrates the nuclear family and having kids, unquote. Musk responded, quote, we just need to celebrate having kids, unquote. The CEO of pharmaceutical and biotechnology company Moderna, Stefan Bancel, said the company is having to, quote, throw away, unquote, millions of doses of COVID-19 vaccines because nobody wants them. Bancel made the comments during an appearance at the World Economic Forum on Monday, while noting his concerns over the lack of people getting vaccinated and waning immunity among those who have had the shots but declined to get boosters. Bancel said, quote, it's sad to say I'm in the process of throwing 30 million doses in the garbage because nobody wants them. We have a big demand problem, unquote. The Moderna chief explained that his company contacted a number of governments across the globe to see if anyone wants to take the vaccines, but it has proven to be unsuccessful. Republican lawmakers in Indiana have overridden the veto of Governor Eric Holcomb on a bill that bans transgender athletes from competing in girls' sports across the state. The Indiana law would prohibit K through 12 students who are born male who have identified as a female from participating in a sport or on an athletic team that is designated for women or girls. However, it would not prevent students who identify as female or transgender men from playing on men's sports teams. Holcomb, a Republican, had nixed the bill in March despite it passing with majority support in both chambers of the state legislature. In a veto letter, he said that the legislation opened the state to lawsuits and that he found no evidence that there was an existing problem. In turn, Republican lawmakers voted to override his veto on Tuesday with a 67 to 26 vote in the House and a 32 to 15 vote in the Senate. The override only required a simple majority vote in both chambers. An Iraqi man living in Columbus, Ohio, has been charged by federal authorities for allegedly plotting to smuggle foreign nationals into the United States as part of a plan to assassinate former President George W. Bush. Agents from the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force arrested the Iraqi 52-year-old on Tuesday morning. He appeared in federal court at 2:30 p.m. and his case was unsealed at that time, according to the Department of Justice. Authorities caught the man in a sting set up under the direction of the FBI. In August of 2021, it is alleged that he intended to help who he thought was an Iraqi citizen enter the country for a $40,000 fee. The DOJ said the charging document also alleges that he had plans to smuggle 4 additional Iraqis into the United States, quote, for the purpose of killing former President George W. Bush in retaliation for Iraqi deaths during Operation Iraqi Freedom, unquote. Operation Iraqi Freedom, commonly known as the Iraq War, was launched in 2003 by the United States under President Bush. Auto and home insurance giant State Farm said it is no longer a part of a collaborative book donation campaign that promotes transgenderism to kindergartners following a media expose based on a whistleblower email. The internal email, allegedly leaked by concerned State Farm employees, states that the company partnered with transgender youth advocacy group, the Gender Cool Project, in a campaign to increase representation of LGBTQ plus books and support our communities in having challenging, important, and empowering conversations with the children age 5 plus. The email is dated January 18th and was sent by Jose Soto, a corporate responsibility analyst for State Farm in Florida. Soto asked for 6 State Farm insurance agents in Florida to volunteer to participate in the program by, quote, receiving these books in March and then donating them to their community by the end of April, unquote. Quote, agents are key to the success of this program. Nationwide, approximately 550 State Farm agents and employees will have the opportunity to donate this 3-book bundle to their local teacher, community center, or library of their choice, unquote. Reads the email obtained by Consumers Research, a nonprofit organization working to expose big companies that put, quote, woke politics, unquote, ahead of their customers. In its initial response to the Washington Examiner, which broke the story, State Farm defended the program, insisting that the company embraces diversity and inclusion because it's the right thing to do. It also claimed that the program is strictly voluntary and that participants are not being asked to share with schools. Facing a growing backlash that includes calls to boycott the company, however, State Farm released a second statement saying it is ending its partnership with Gender Cool. Top House Republicans are demanding answers from the FBI after court-ordered information came to light showing that federal agencies had collected the information of over 3 million Americans without warrant. In a May 25th letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray, Representatives Jim Jordan and Mike Turner, both from Ohio, asked Wray to explain why his agency had wiretapped and gathered personal information on over 3.3 million Americans without a warrant. Limited authority to gather foreign intelligence information is granted by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Specifically, Section 702 of the bill says, quote, the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence may jointly authorize the targeting of non-U.S. persons who are reasonably believed to be outside of the United States to acquire foreign intelligence information, unquote. However, this power can grant an expanding circle of possible searches to the FBI and other intel agencies who can use the same power against American citizens who had any interaction with targeted foreigners. Historically, insight into how FISA has been used against American citizens has been limited and hidden behind classified reports. Welcome back into the Matthew Rocky Show for this week of May 23rd. We're going to start in this second half by taking a look at some notes from this week in history. Going back to the 23rd, Monday, in 1915, Italy declared war on Austria-Hungary during World War I. In 1934, bank robbers Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker were shot to death in Louisiana. 1937, industrialist and philanthropist John Rockefeller, founder of the Standard Oil Company and the Rockefeller Foundation, died in Florida at the age of 97. From Tuesday the 24th, a few notes. First of all, in 1844, Samuel F.B. Morse transmitted the message, "What hath God wrought?" from Washington to Baltimore, as he formally opened America's first telegraph line. 1935, the first Major League Baseball game took place at Cincinnati's Crosley Field as the Reds beat the Philadelphia Phillies by a final score of 2-1. 1976, Britain and France opened transatlantic Concorde supersonic transport service to Washington. Moving into Wednesday, the 25th, a few notes. First of all, 1787, the Constitutional Convention began at the Pennsylvania State House, also known as Independence Hall in Philadelphia, after enough delegates had shown up for a quorum. Moving to 1968, the Gateway Arch in St. Louis was dedicated by Vice President Hubert Humphrey and Interior Secretary Stuart Udall. 1979, 273 people were killed when an American Airlines DC-10 crashed just after takeoff from Chicago's O'Hare Airport. From Thursday the 26th, it was in 1864 that President Abraham Lincoln signed a measure creating the Montana Territory. And also on that day, it was in 2009, that President Barack Obama nominated federal appeals judge Sonia Sotomayor to the United States Supreme Court. And for today, some notes to mention. First of all, it was in 1937 the newly completed Golden Gate Bridge connecting San Francisco and Marin County, California was open to pedestrian traffic. Vehicles began crossing the following day. And in 1994, Nobel Prize winning author Alexander Solzhenitsyn returned to Russia to the emotional cheers of thousands after spending 2 decades in exile. There you go, some highlights and lowlights from this week in history. Once again, it is the week of May 23rd. Let's get into some of those unusual stories from across the globe. First of all, it's one of the few feel-good stories to come out of the nation's largest wildfire. Firefighters in New Mexico have rescued an abandoned newborn elk calf, born amid the ashes of the blaze. A Montana-based firefighter says he happened upon the motionless elk calf on the ground of fire-blackened forest as he was trying to snuff out lingering hotspots. Nate Sink says he didn't know whether the baby elk was dead or alive. And because wildlife officials discourage having interaction with elk calves left alone in the woods, he searched around for signs of a mother, but found none. The 32-pound singed bull calf was taken to a nearby ranch for care, and it has been appropriately nicknamed Cinder. Moving to Germany, a German stud farm owner and horse trainer is going old school in an effort to keep from having to pay skyrocketing gasoline prices. Stephanie Kirschner has switched from the horsepower provided by her SUV to the kind of horsepower provided by her horse. She uses a horse-drawn carriage to get around in town these days in Western Germany. She says with gas prices going up because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, she has decided to make the change. She says with prices for everything else going up too, she feels the need to, quote, save a little money. Definitely understand the thought process there, and I don't know, I've thought about doing the same myself. Well, if this ring could talk, it would have quite the story to tell. After a series of adventures, a gold signet ring that is more than 3,000 years old has made its way back to Greece. The ring was stolen from the Aegean Sea Island during World War II. After being pilfered, it crossed the Atlantic, where it was bought by a Nobel Prize-winning Hungarian scientist and ended up in a Swedish museum before it was transferred back to Greece. It's the latest in a series of coups by Greek authorities seeking the return of works of art plundered from the antique-rich country. Well, it's a case of life imitating art decades after the art was done. A man who, as a child, had a small role in the 1975 movie Jaws has ended up being the police chief of the Massachusetts island where part of the movie was filmed. Jonathan Seal got the job of police chief at Oak Bluffs last week, and he says he is elated, humbled, and honored about that. Well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, it's kind of ironic that you would have that all come together at some point in the future, especially close to 50 years later, but definitely a really cool storyline to be able to tell. Well, scientists have discovered what is believed to be the world's largest bedsheet. More on this story as it unfolds. Moving on to our next story. It was Cap Day at the ballpark, at least for one Philadelphia Phillies fan, at a game against the San Diego Padres last Thursday. Keith McGuire Jr. attended with his buddies, but he realized he had no Phillies gear, so he stopped at a souvenir stand and bought one he liked. Well, he wasn't the one who liked it. It caught the eye of Phillies star Bryce Harper, who spotted it from the dugout and asked for it. McGuire turned over the cap, and in return, Harper autographed the team-issued one that he had and swapped it with the fan. After the game, Harper said he liked the cap and offered his as a trade. McGuire says of the experience, quote, It was so random, it was awesome, unquote. It isn't the run of the roses or even the running of the bulls, but what you might call the jostling of the Joshes has made a return to Lincoln, Nebraska. A couple hundred people gathered at a park for a pitched battle over the quote official right to the name Josh. This battle began as an online joke between Josh Swain of Tucson, Arizona, when he sent a challenge to anyone with the same first name to fight over it using pool noodles. As the idea spread, Swain made it into a real event last year, inviting people to Lincoln, the city that matches the random geocoordinates in his original tweet. This year, many competitors stepped up their game by wearing costumes like masks, animal suits, and football suits. But no one could dethrone the 5-year-old Josh Vincent Jr., who defended the title of number one Josh. He won at the inaugural event. This year's battle raised $21,000 for the Children's Hospital and Medical Center in Omaha. There you go. I would definitely take up a challenge of battling people for the name Matthew. I don't really think I would win, but it's an interesting idea and definitely pretty funny that it has gained so much popularity in just 2 years. Well, how is a moose different than an ant? Well, moose have antlers, but ants don't have mooslers. I mean, it's a good point. I used to work for a blanket company, but unfortunately it folded. And I got another question for you. If you think about it, humans eat more bananas than monkeys. I mean, have you ever eaten a monkey before? All right, moving right along. It took a village or at least a strong community effort to help 7 stranded dolphins get back into deeper waters. The dolphins got stranded Wednesday in a shallow part of the Herring River on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, but their fate changed for the better thanks to the work of more than 40 experts, interns, and volunteers. The International Fund for Animal Welfare says the team had to work quickly to help the Atlantic white-sided dolphins because the tide was heading in and the dolphins could have been stranded once the tide rolled back out. The dolphins were released into deeper waters off of Provincetown before that happened. There you go, helping out those dolphins. Well, that'll do it for the Matthew Rocky Show for this week. As we wrap things up, last couple of things for you. What do you get when you cross an angry sheep and an angry cow? Well, you get 2 animals in a bad mood. Another thing, I quit my job working for Nike. I just couldn't do it. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next time right here on the Matthew Rocky Show.